Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from Alex Merced Coder, and this is another video. And in this video, we're going to be talking about functions, but particularly we're going to be focusing on function arguments and all the cool little tricks with function arguments. So I'm not going to really focus on like returning values and other fun stuff you can do with functions, but maximizing your ability to take advantage of function parameters. Okay, so first let me show you. I'll show you sort of all the tricks in two different syntaxes because that way you know. So there's the original function syntax, which is using the function keyword, and basically I say function hello, and we do that, and then we have our function here. Now, if you're not familiar with how this works, right here in the parentheses we can put in parameters. Think of them as placeholders for data that's going to be given to the function when it is used. So here I'll just say placeholder 1, and then here I'll say placeholder 2. Then I put a comma next to each one, and that's that. And then I can use them inside the function. So console.log placeholder 1, placeholder 2, save. Okay, so these are parameters, or the placeholders. Then when I actually use the function hello, and I actually pass an actual value, so we'll say 5 and 6, those are arguments that I'm passing to the function. So those are called arguments. Okay, so I'm passing the arguments 5 and 6. So in that case, what it should just do is just show me 5 and 6 on the console. So I hit here, I hit node testing, and there you go, you get 5 and 6. So it works. Okay, now that's cool. Now what if I only wanted to put in 6? I don't want to give it both parameters. What happens? Okay, well then I get this 5 and undefined, because technically nothing ever got filled into placeholder 2. Okay, because always the first argument fills in the first parameter, whatever name I called it, and then the next one fills the next placeholder, and you guys get the idea. So I can't depend that everyone who uses my function is going to be smart enough to make sure they put both arguments. So what I can do is I can put default values. So I just do like equals 5 and equals 6. So even if I put no arguments, it'll just assume that I'm okay with the defaults, 5 and 6. Let's see, I get 5 and 6. So I can have default values put in here. Very nice. Okay, now that is cool. That works for me. So that's a neat trick. Other cool tricks you can do is that in this particular syntax, you have access to what's called the arguments object. I've never actually defined arguments. You never saw me put the word arguments anywhere. But if I console log arguments, it exists, but only exists if you're using the function keyword. Okay, and basically what it does, it takes any. So basically, again, the first argument will fill up placeholder 1, the second argument will fill up placeholder 2, and if I keep going beyond that, well, really, I think it's just going to be all the arguments in here. So if I do, watch this, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So see, now I have 5 arguments being passed into hello. So I hit save, and then see, I have a object. It's not really an array. It is iterable. I could do a for loop over it, or of loop over it, that basically shows me all the arguments in there. Okay, you know, it would be probably a little bit easier to turn that into an array. So probably my personal preference is that if I was going to use the arguments object, I'd probably first make an array out of it. So I do like const args, make a new array, and say arg spread out arguments in it. So now I have an array called arguments. So then I would just put in here args, and I hit save, and then I run it, and there you go. I have an array with my arguments. So that's, to me, just easier to work with. That's just easier to work with. Cool. But the arguments object doesn't exist in arrow functions. So how would I do the same thing? So if I were to make this an arrow function, so I'll just turn this into const hello equals my parameters, and then put an arrow right here. There we have an arrow function. This whole arguments thing doesn't exist, so it's going to be all confused and throw me an error. Okay, reason is technically the arguments object belongs to a constructor function. So you do have actually the arguments object does exist in a class constructor. Just a fun side note. But, so what do I want to do here then? Well, I still would like to have all those other arguments. What I can do is create a third argument or a third parameter and put 3 dots, which is referred to as the rest operator in this context. And I'll just say args. Okay, and what that'll do is take all other arguments, put it in args. So now, if I console.log args, okay, I'll have an array of all the other arguments. So see, but not all of them, because 5 went to the first placeholder, 6 went into the second placeholder, and then all the other arguments went into args. Okay, which is cool. That can be definitely useful. So that's a thing you can do. Cool. So some fun with arguments. Now, here's the thing though, doing all this placeholder 2, placeholder 3 can sometimes be a little undependable. So sometimes you maybe want to pass in an array or an object. Very common practice is actually just expect that an argument with all the information you need gets passed into the function. Okay, so usually you'll see this in a lot of libraries where there's like a config object. Okay, and then, you know, I'll just be like config.this, config.that. Okay. I'll just console log config. So let's say instead I'm passing into hello an object. And I'll just say, hey, in here I'm going to have a name, Alex Merced, type, human. Okay, save. And when I pass in this object, hey, look, my console log config. But here's the thing. There's 2 issues with this at this point. One, what if I only basically, I'm only using these 2 properties, let's say. So let's say I only want to console a config.name and config.type. But then I start adding all these other properties like cheese, Gouda. So essentially what's going to happen is that you're going to still get the whole object. So save. So I'm only going to console log those 2 properties, the Alex Merced, human. But this cheese Gouda property is still technically inside the object. It's still technically being held in memory during the runtime, which is not necessarily performant. So what if I just want to make sure that, you know, yes, I want you to pass in an object with certain properties, but I only want to get the properties that I'm going to use. Okay, what I can do is use destructuring. So I'll do this. Name, type. And what this does, it's destructuring. So when the object gets passed in as an argument, it's going to look for a name property, put that in a variable called name, and look for a type property, and put that in a variable called type. So now I can just do this, name and type. So I still get my nice little variables without dot notation, but I can still have the user just pass in a object with all these keys. And then the nice thing about that is that I don't have to worry about what order they put them in. So if they're not really good about putting arguments in the right order, as long as they put the right keys in the object they pass into the function, we're all good. Okay, and this will still do the same trick. See, Alex Merced human. So I can destructure an object coming in. I could destructure an array coming in. So let's say I did this instead. Let's say the first argument we expect is an array, and I want to get the first variable is going to be name, the second one's going to be type. Okay, and then instead I'm passing in array, and the first piece of data is my name, Alex Merced, and the second piece of data in the array is my human. Okay, so what happens when this array gets passed in? It takes whatever the first thing in the array is, puts it under the variable name, takes the second thing, puts it under the variable type, and it still works. Alex Merced human, very nice. Okay, and here's the thing: all that matters is that I put in it gets passed an array. I don't actually have to give it an array directly. I could sit there here and invoke a function. Okay, invoke a function that actually creates an array. So let me, let's see if I remember how to do this right. Okay, so I have to put parentheses, I'm pretty sure, around the function, something like this. So I do the arrow function, and then this function will return the array. This is a sort of a overly stupidly way to do this, but it's just, this is what's referred to as an iffy. It's a function that immediately runs. So you define it and you immediately run it after you define it, but you never give it a name. You don't put it in a variable because you're never going to use it again. So Alex Merced, human, and then I think I have to put, then I have to put another set of parentheses after the function definition, I'm pretty sure, like this. Okay, I don't think that I have this right, but now I'll just do this in a slightly different way in a second. Save. Okay, so technically what I'm doing here is I'm saying, hey, there's this function I'm defining, this arrow function here, and I want to immediately invoke it. But for some reason, you always have to wrap that in parentheses for it to kind of work right, and that's referred to as an iffy. Okay, so let's see if I did that right. So if I did that right, this function is going to run before the function runs, before hello runs, and end up returning this array. So really what's getting passed to hello is the array, not the function. Okay, yeah, I think okay, maybe I don't need the parentheses anymore. Let's try it without. So if I do this, never really used ifs much. Yeah, okay. Today I fail at ifs. So here's what I'm going to do instead. We're going to take this function, cut, just define it, const an array equals this function. So then I'll just run an array as a function. Okay, and basically with this, and again, with the two parentheses, I'm invoking the function. So I'm not passing the function as an argument. I'm passing the return value of the function as an argument. And what does it return? An array. And what happens when that array arrives? It gets destructured. And I get name and type. Okay, so let's watch. It'll work. I'm not trying to do funky iffy things. There we go. Alex said human. Now, what if I did want to pass the argument as an argument? You can do that. That's what's referred to as a callback. Okay, and basically, so in that case, I would just pass in the name of the function, and that passes in the actual function as something into the here, and I'll just say this parameter is called func, so that's my placeholder, and we'll just say func gets invoked there. So I'm passing in this function called an array, which then fills in the placeholder of func. So anywhere where I use func gets filled in with an array. Here becomes an array. I invoke that function. So I run that function, which returns the array inside console log. Console log then logs the array. So let's run that. And see, there's the array. Alex percent human. Okay, very, very cool. I'm trying to think if there's any other cool, fun things we can do with parameters. So we talked about the rest. We talked about arguments. We talked about destructuring your parameters. We talked about default values. So I mean that should be pretty good. That should give you a lot of firepower. Is what you can do when you pass information into a function. You can literally pass anything into a function. You can even pass a class into a function. Okay, so I could do something like this. I could be like, hello, pass in, you know, class, you know, constructor. Not that you would ever do this, as I can't really think of a reason you would do this in particular, but maybe with web components. But we'll just say this dot thing, this dot name equals hello. Okay, so I pass in this class, and we'll just say, we'll call this the placeholder the type. This is just a really silly example, but so then what I will do is I will create const new thing equals a new the type. Takes the class, and now I can use a class. I can use a placeholder as if it was a class that was passed in, because I'm assuming that's what I'm passing in. So a new the type. Then I gotta invoke it. And then I should be able to console log new thing, and we'll see that it has this .name, or has the name property. New thing. Save. So let's make sure that works. So again, what should happen is I'm running hello. Hello is passing in this class definition. This class definition ends up being held in the type. So I use the class definition to actually create a new instance of that class, new thing. And then I console log new thing, and I should have an object that has a name property called hello, because that's what class constructors do. They create a new object with the class definition. And there you go. So I got a new object with the name hello. Now, that's a silly thing. Again, there are situations where you may want to pass a class as an argument. I can't think of one. Again, maybe with web components. But yeah, that's there's a lot you can literally pass anything into a function and use it. You just got to make sure that you know what's being passed in and use it that way in your function. So yeah, last thing I'll just say is that it doesn't hurt to always kind of test what people are passing into your function using instance of. It won't work for like numbers and booleans. Another reason why it's nice to have objects and arrays as your arguments, because then I can do something like this, like if, you know, if the type, you know, is instance of, I'm not even sure if class, is class an do we have a class interface? Class, no. It wouldn't really work with that particular, if it was like a object or an array, I could test it and then be like, hey, you didn't give me an array or something. Okay, but yeah, I think we hit some good stuff. So I'll leave it at that. I'll see you guys later on. Have a good one. Ciao.